Well, good afternoon to you. We have, I think, some more people out in the hall who will be straggling in, but I don't think we're going to penalize those of you who arrived on time. I'm Bob Hathaway. I have the good fortune of running the Asia program here at the Wilson Center. Since I see a number of unfamiliar faces, I hope you'll permit me to tell you just a bit about the Wilson Center. We are an independent, nonpartisan institute for advanced research. We were created by an act of Congress in 1968 as the nation's official memorial to Woodrow Wilson, our 28th president. Some of you perhaps know that President Wilson had a distinguished career as a scholar and an academic prior to entering the political arena. And I think this pretty much describes our mission. We seek to serve as a bridge between the world of the scholar and the world of the policymaker, to commemorate both the scholarly depth and the public policy concerns of President Wilson. And I think that when you hear me introduce our speaker today, you will appreciate how he very well exemplifies both of these worlds, that of the scholar and the policymaker. We are delighted to have a whole host of very distinguished visitors with us today, some of whom, though not all, but some of whom are sitting here in the first row. I'm not going to acknowledge and publicly recognize each and every one, but I certainly want to acknowledge the presence of the ambassador. Mr. Ambassador, we're delighted to have you with us, as well as the Sri Lankan Minister of Environment. To you gentlemen and to all our guests, we are delighted to welcome you. 3 years ago this week saw the conclusion of one of the world's bloodiest and long-running civil wars. Many of us wondered whether we would ever see a Sri Lanka at peace, and virtually the entire world celebrated the defeat of the LTTE in 2009. Unfortunately, Sri Lankans have discovered that history did not stop in 2009, but that the world remains full of challenges. And our speaker today wakes up every morning to find that many of those challenges fall squarely on his lap. We are pleased to have with us this afternoon Sri Lanka's Minister of External Affairs, G.L. Paris. Minister Paris, like Woodrow Wilson, has successfully combined the careers of scholar and statesman. His distinctions as a scholar are as impressive as achievements in the political arena. He is a Rhodes Scholar. He has earned not one, but 2 PhDs. For 25 years, he taught law at the University of Colombo, eventually serving as Dean of the Faculty of Law, and then University Vice Chancellor. His list of publications would be sufficient to win tenure for 10 or 12 different professors or normal professors. It's a huge list. And then, like Woodrow Wilson, Mr. Paris abandoned the academic life to take up politics. Since entering the political world in 1994, he has been the minister or the deputy minister in a succession of ministries, culminating in his appointment 2 years ago as Minister of External Affairs. Mr. Minister, we are delighted to welcome you to the center. We are pleased that you have chosen the Wilson Center as the site for your principal public address during your visit to Washington this week. I am absolutely convinced that if President Wilson saw your CV, he would recognize a kindred spirit, and I now invite you to take the podium.
Mr. Chairman, Robert Hathaway, my colleague, the Honorable Anurayapa, Minister for the Environment, Your Excellency Jali Vikramasuriya, the Ambassador of Sri Lanka in the United States, Honorable Sajin Vaskunawardena, Member of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here with you this afternoon to share a few thoughts with you on what Mr. Hathaway described as the challenges that we are confronting at the present moment. As he said, until 3 years ago, until 2009, the principal challenge that we had to deal with was a reign of terror unleashed on us by an organization that was described as by the FBI as the most ruthless terrorist organization on this planet. Contrary to the expectations of the world, the President and the government of Sri Lanka succeeded in eradicating terrorism from our country. And the challenge today is to address the issues pertaining to reconciliation in such a manner as to enable our country to leave behind us the pain and the anguish of a protracted conflict which spanned 3 long decades, and at last to address in earnest the imperatives of social and economic development. Now, I would ask members of this audience to reflect objectively on what I'm about to tell you, on what has been accomplished in Sri Lanka during the last 3 years, where we are today, and what we envision to be the trajectory of development in the near future. I might also add that some of the issues that I will be talking about are not simply confined to the shores of Sri Lanka, but they have perhaps a wider relevance and significance insofar as they mirror some of the complexities of situations that arise in a society that is undertaking the transition from conflict to tranquility and stability. The war ended, as Mr. Hathaway said, in May 2009, and our conviction at that time, and indeed now, is that we have to identify what needs to be done, to prioritize the steps that we consider to be necessary. Where do we begin? What are the issues that we address as we go along? What are the objectives that we wish to work towards? And what are the modalities that we consider appropriate for the achievement of those objectives within the shortest possible time? By any criterion, there can be no conceivable doubt that the first priority was the resettlement of the people who had been displaced by this excruciatingly painful conflict. Now, I'm happy to tell you, this is no exaggeration, this can be verified, that 98% of the people who were displaced by the conflict have now been resettled. And by resettlement, I don't mean just a physical process of enabling them to have a roof over their heads, but we have seen to it that this resettlement occurred in an environment that is pervaded by contentment, by satisfaction, because we do not want people to be resettled as embittered, disillusioned, disgruntled human beings, but rather as human beings looking to the future with confidence in themselves and the country to which they feel proud to belong. So that is with regard to the internally displaced people. That was a humanitarian consideration, which was obviously entitled to priority from any perspective, whatever. Then the ex-combatants, for the most part, these were young people, misguided, persuaded to take up arms against the state, and to espouse a way of life which is characterized by violence. There were approximately 11,600 such people who surrendered to the state at the conclusion of hostilities 3 years ago, among whom there were 595 child soldiers. We started with the child soldiers, and today I'm able to tell you that 90% of these ex-combatants have been reintegrated into society after the benefit of exposure to vocational training programs that equip them adequately to earn their living, to go back to their villages and their families, to start a new life, confident that they will be able to live with dignity in Sri Lankan society. One of the other challenges related to the question of demining. This was a very difficult task and is still not complete in that part of the country where the LTTE, the terrorist movement, took its final stand. But 94% of the work connected with demining has now been completed with very substantial assistance that we received from several foreign governments, including your own. The other task that we had to accomplish was this: economic development. We believe in reconciliation, but economic development is a crucial component of any viable and realistic process of reconciliation. Whatever else you may attempt to do, it is exceedingly unlikely that you would succeed in your objective unless people have access to incomes and livelihoods. Consequently, it was a deliberate decision on the part of the President of Sri Lanka, President Mahinda Rajapaksa, that we have to focus very sharply on the economic development of the northern region, which had been particularly devastated by the atrocities perpetrated by the liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam. Now, you would be no doubt interested to hear that the economy of the northern province is growing today at the rate of 22%, when the figure for the rest of the island, for the island as a whole, is at the threshold of about 8.3%. Now, this is not fortuitous, this is not coincidental, but it is the result of sustained and very substantial investment by the government of Sri Lanka in infrastructure development in that part of the country. Highways, railroad systems, irrigation projects, the power and energy sector, a huge thrust in the sectors of health and education. All of this has brought about an economic revival of major proportions in the northern part of the island. This means that there has been a resuscitation of fisheries, which is today one of the major means of livelihood of the people of the north. These are activities which were regrettably not just interfered with, but entirely discontinued in consequence of the operations of the sea tigers in the northern waters of the island. The Jaffna Peninsula has a climate which is particularly suitable for the cultivation of exotic fruits and vegetables. Sri Lanka has more varieties of fruits in that part of the country, more varieties of mangoes than most countries have varieties of fruits. We have placed a very sharp emphasis on agricultural activity, on education, which is very important for the people of the north. And what you are seeing is the singular transformation of a society which just 5 years ago was gripped by fear. And today, wherever you travel in Sri Lanka, what you will encounter is a new mood of emancipation, of confidence in our people and in their future. So this is with regard to economic development, which we perceive as an indispensable component of national reconciliation. Now, we do understand, and there is absolutely no doubt about this, that here is an opportunity which has presented itself after a quarter of a century, and we are quite determined to make the maximum use of this opportunity, not to let it slip through our fingers. If that is to happen, what is absolutely essential is a spirit of inclusivity. That is, all the people of Sri Lanka together, irrespective of considerations of ethnicity, cultural background, or religion, have to unite in a common endeavor, in a common resolve to use this rare opportunity to move the country forward rapidly. This is the reason why President Mahinda Rajapaksa appointed a Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission. It is a local commission to probe the causes of the conflict and to make pragmatic recommendations relating to measures that are necessary to move the country forward in the circumstances which have manifested themselves in the current situation in Sri Lanka. Now, just 2 weeks ago, the Sri Lankan cabinet set up a strong and effective mechanism for the implementation of the recommendations of the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission in a structured way. Where do you begin? What are the short-term measures that can be implemented? And what are the other things that you need to take up further down the road? Now, these are the main matters that are occupying our attention right now. We have already done away with the whole edifice of emergency regulations, which at that time were a necessity for the protection of life and limb. But the government of Sri Lanka was quite determined to bring that extraordinary regime to an end as soon as the hostilities were over. So emergency regulations are no longer operative in any part of the island, and high security zones which were established during that period to contend with these extraordinary circumstances which were visited upon us by a ruthless terrorist organization are now in the process of being dismantled. There is today only one high security zone in the northern peninsula, that is the Palali area, and 43% of that has now been given up. And it will shrink further during the next few weeks. We have established a database which enables people to gather information relating to members of their families whose whereabouts are not known. Advertisements have been inserted in the national media in all 3 languages, indicating to the relevant people the steps that they ought to take to have access to this information. We are also addressing very complex and convoluted issues relating to land. These are incredibly difficult. The historical background to the problem is that the terrorist group evicted the lawful owners of these lands and put into possession members of what they call the Mahavir families, the families of the LTTE cadres. They were put in possession, and now with the return of peace and tranquility, the former owners are coming back to reclaim what belongs to them, and the government is in the process of handling this multifaceted problem in a situation where authentic title deeds are no longer available, because the terrorists destroyed those deeds in the areas of which they were in effective control at the relevant time. So the land issues are also being addressed. It is my profound conviction, not just as a politician and a cabinet minister, but as an educationist. As Mr. Hathaway pointed out to you a few minutes ago, I spent 26 years of my life in higher education, teaching 2 generations of Sri Lankan students who, in my view, are in every way the equal of the best students at Oxford and Cambridge. It is my experience in the university system of Sri Lanka that one of the basic causes which led to the aggravation of tensions was a kind of stratification of society that was brought about by considerations relating to language. If we talk of the young generation in Sri Lanka today, in our schools and in our universities, we have the problem that the Sinhala community is not really able to talk to the Tamil community and vice versa, because neither community speaks the language of the other, and neither community is really comfortable with the use of English. When I was an undergraduate myself, we were not overly conscious of racial identity because we could speak to one another in English. And friendships were made on the basis of shared interests and values rather than on factors rooted in ethnicity. For that reason, the President of Sri Lanka has rightly acknowledged, accepting enthusiastically one of the recommendations of the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission, that there ought to be established as a matter of priority a program which promotes bilingual or, if possible, trilingual competence. This is a program that was inaugurated in our country about 5 months ago with the participation of the former President of India, His Excellency Dr. Abdul Kalam, a renowned scientist, who accepted with pleasure the invitation that was extended to him by the President of Sri Lanka to visit Colombo for the purpose of inaugurating this exciting and obviously relevant and beneficial program. We have also taken action to appoint large numbers of Tamil-speaking police officers to man police stations in the northern part of the country. And during the last 10 months, no fewer than 700 such Tamil-speaking police officers have been appointed. Government of Sri Lanka is acting effectively and rapidly to ensure the greater use of the Tamil language in judicial administration and in civil administration. All of this is now happening. Then, moving on to the longer term measures, Government of Sri Lanka is about to set up a parliamentary select committee, which is a forum that enables all the political parties in the Sri Lankan parliament to come together to give their collective attention to the constitutional changes that are appropriate in my country at the present time. Some difficulty was experienced in prevailing upon some of the major Tamil political parties to enter into this process. There were some reservations on the part of some of these parties. But as recently as 2 days ago, there was an important meeting in Colombo to try to break this deadlock and to enable these deliberations to commence. Now, you are aware that during the last 12 years, several successive governments of different political complexions have made an attempt to put some of these constitutional changes in place. Unfortunately, none of these attempts succeeded for one fundamental reason, namely the lack of a sufficient consensus in the country at large in support of the reforms that were proposed. It is very much our intention to avoid history repeating itself. We don't want to add one more leaf to the thicket. We don't want to come up with a series of recommendations that would gather dust on a shelf. The critical need this time round is for implementation. And this is why we want every political group in the Sri Lankan parliament to have the opportunity of articulating their views on the changes that are desirable at this time. So everybody is included in the process, there are stakeholders in the process, nobody feels excluded, and that is the only way to achieve a set of reforms that would actually be implementable on the ground. So these are the main issues that we are dealing with, and I would like to emphasize one matter in conclusion. I would like to conclude my remarks within the next few minutes in order to enable you to put to me any questions that you wish. And also I would be very interested in listening to any comments or observations that you care to make. We are conscious of the importance of the opportunity that has now presented itself. Nobody is more conscious of that reality than the government and the people of Sri Lanka. But we also realize that if these changes that we have in mind are to be effected, then the process that is adopted must be seen by the country to be a domestic process, sensitive to the aspirations of our people, harmonizing with our culture. And that there should not be a perception in the country that this is some kind of process that is donor-driven or excessively foreign-owned. Because if that feeling is engendered in the country, inevitably it would trigger a reaction that would be unhelpful in terms of implementing the reforms that are required at this moment in our history. So the nuances of the situation are therefore important. This does not mean that we are not prepared to listen to our friends from abroad. That is by no means the case. But at the end of the day, the solution that emerges must have a homegrown quality about it. Now, this is amply recognized by the international legal and political system, which accords priority to the principle that domestic remedies and domestic procedures must have precedence. Now, government of Sri Lanka is dealing with a set of problems which did not arise yesterday or the day before. It has been a historical process. It has been an accumulation of issues over a protracted period of time. There cannot be impatience. These are not matters that can be sorted out overnight. And what is required is a process, a realistic, sustained process to address these issues. The principal purpose of my visit to Washington on this occasion is to place information at the disposal of policymakers in this important city. This morning, we started our program this morning. We had the privilege of having an informal interaction with 3 senators. We will be meeting many other representatives of Congress and the Senate, and also leading members of the United States administration. And my final appointment before I leave Washington on Friday will be with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. I also welcome the opportunity of interacting with think tanks such as your own, the Woodrow Wilson Center. And it is very much our wish to share our thoughts and perceptions with policymakers in Washington. There's much that the United States and Sri Lanka can do together in the new situation that has presented itself in Sri Lanka. We have more than 5,000 Sri Lankan students studying in the universities of the United States. The United States is one of the major markets for our exports, particularly our apparel products. We have in operation right now a trade and investment framework agreement between Sri Lanka and the United States. So all the ingredients are in place, and I welcome this opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to come here this afternoon and to share these thoughts with you on what is being done in Sri Lanka at the present moment, the magnitude of the problems that we had to deal with, our perception of priorities, the steps that we have put in place to address these problems for the well-being of the people of Sri Lanka as a whole. So I thank you, and I would be delighted to respond to any questions that you wish to put to me. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Give us a few seconds to get us hooked up so that you can hear us and we can hear you. The minister, as you have heard, has agreed to take some questions from the audience. I will get things started by asking a question or two, but I will very promptly turn it over to you. A couple of ground rules. You're in Washington. You are familiar with these ground rules. Wait until I call upon you. Wait until the microphone reaches you. Briefly identify yourself. And particularly, please keep your comments and or your questions very brief so that we can give as many people as we can an opportunity to be part of the conversation. So a little cooperation from you would be greatly appreciated. Let me get hooked up and then we'll start. Okay, can you hear me? All right, Mr. Minister, let me simply say by way of introduction that even leaving aside the North, if the rest of Sri Lanka can grow at a rate of 8.3%, I know two presidential candidates would love to enlist you and your colleagues in the effort to jumpstart our own economy. So kudos certainly to this quite impressive performance for Sri Lanka. Let me start off with really what may be the toughest issue, one that you alluded to near the end of your remarks. Our countries have for long enjoyed friendly ties. We worked particularly closely together in the years and months leading up to the end of the Civil War 3 years ago. And now, tragically, we find ourselves with different perspectives on what took place 3 years ago and on what needs to be done now. The United States, of course, has been a leader in the UN Human Rights Council in sponsoring a resolution to which your government vehemently objects. How is it, given the fact that in 2005, and 2006, and 2007 and 2008, we shared a perspective? How do you think we've come to the point where we are today, where we clearly have very different perspectives on what happened 3 years ago and what needs to be done? And if I can simply add one more parenthetical comment, I would simply note that not only the United States, but 23 other nations in the Human Rights Council also sponsored and voted for this resolution. So it's not simply that the Americans are sort of idiosyncratic. But how do you think we have come to this impasse, and how can we get out of it?
No, I don't think the contrast between these attitudes is quite as striking as you suggest. I mean, the point of your question is that there was a very large area of convergence earlier, but now it seems to be that the two positions are opposing and not easily reconcilable. But I don't think that that is quite the position, because after all, what is the gist of the resolution that was proposed by the United States and supported by 22 other countries? The thrust of the resolution is to call upon the government of Sri Lanka to give effect to the recommendations contained in the report of our own commission, the Sri Lankan Commission. That's what the US resolution is all about. And that was emphasized by the ambassador of the United States, Her Excellency Eileen Donahue, when she spoke in Geneva. She said, this is all that we are asking the government of Sri Lanka to do. Now, as far as that is concerned, there is no fundamental disagreement at all. We are prepared to implement in a structured way on the basis of priorities. We are not asked to implement The US is not asking us to implement anybody else's report, but our own report. And that's not a position from which we dissent. The only disagreement is this. We feel strongly, and many other countries, including a swath of countries in Asia, and well, almost the entirety of the Arab world also, you know, felt very strongly, and indeed said so just before the vote was taken, that they were of opinion that Sri Lanka needed to be given the time and the space to carry this delicate and sensitive process forward at its own pace. You know, these things have a kind of a life and a rhythm of their own, and you cannot force the pace artificially without inflicting damage on the result which you wish to accomplish. So it's not as though the US had one view and we had a completely different view, and there's no way of reconciling the two positions. That's not the case. We want to implement our report in a structured way. The US is asking us to do that. There's no disagreement. But we do not think that the right way to set about it is by a foreign country using a multilateral forum such as the Human Rights Council to pass resolutions of that kind, because the inevitable result of that is to create other pressures within the country which would then ask, what are we doing? Whose initiative is this? This is a proud country, it has strong institutions, and why do we consider it necessary to succumb to these pressures? So we don't think that that is helpful. So my answer to you briefly is that the disagreement is not as dramatic as it appears to be, and the whole emphasis in my discussions here in Washington during this visit is to find common ground. We agree about a lot of things. The agreement is far greater than the disagreement. Now, how do we concretize this in such a manner as to give new strength and vitality to a bilateral relationship which is already robust and healthy? How can we improve it further? So that is how I would look at the situation.
Thank you. One more question on an entirely different topic. Global warming on a lot of our minds. Some people fear that one of your neighbors, the Maldives, may be completely submerged before the end of the century. Sri Lanka, obviously very much larger than Maldives, nonetheless an island in the midst of a vast ocean. How great a threat to Sri Lanka is global warming, and what are you and what is your government doing about it? Or in fact, are you really hostage to the actions of a whole host of governments?
Well, it is an issue that we are very much interested in. I don't think it has quite the immediate repercussions that the Maldives are concerned with. But the President of Sri Lanka will be attending the upcoming meeting in Rio de Janeiro in the third week of June. And our concern is one of policy, basically. And it is this, that certainly there is an issue that we need to grapple with. And when His Excellency President Rajapaksa and I were here last September, there was a fascinating discussion on global warming at the meeting of the Clinton Initiative. And President Jacob Zuma, in his remarks on that occasion, said that we have been talking about this long enough, and now the time has come for concrete action, not for interminable discussions. Now, if we are thinking of concrete action, it is very much the view of the government of Sri Lanka that it would be unfair in finding a solution to this problem to impose a burden on developing countries which have really made no contribution whatsoever to the exacerbation of these issues, the emission of greenhouse gases. Because if you follow the trajectory of these discussions from Kyoto through Copenhagen and Durban, and now the upcoming Rio meeting, there is a school of thought that the solution is to impose restrictions, and to spread them out across the board. We think that that is a fundamentally inequitable approach, because the burden for the most part would then fall on countries which are now trying to raise their heads. I mean, ever since the Industrial Revolution, much of the pollution has been done by the industrialized countries. And now to say to countries that are developing, no, you must restrict your industrial activities, airlines, connectivity, all of that. We think that that is basically unfair, because that would inhibit the industrial, the commercial, and the economic development of those countries which need to be helped. And a solution has to be found which is morally and ethically defensible. Morally and ethically defensible in the sense that the burden should fall on those who have made the biggest contribution in aggravating the problem to its present proportions, and that there should not be unjustifiable restrictions imposed on the developing world, which really has had nothing to do with the deterioration of the situation.
Good. Let's turn it over to you now. Goyal, again, wait please until the microphone gets you.
Thank you very much. Raghubir Goyal, India Globe and Asia Today. Mr. Minister, a couple of points. One, finally relief has come to the people of Sri Lanka, of course, but there was so much bitterness and poison was among the societies, and how can you take out this poison among the people? For so long it has been going on. And two, when you meet with Secretary Hillary Clinton, what will be your message or what Sri Lanka wants from the U.S.? And finally, what kind
Let's keep it to two
what-
questions, since we have a lot of other people who
if you're
want.
getting any support from India in any way in this manner? Thank you, sir.
Okay, I mean, they're all very broad questions. On the first one, of course, a conflict of that kind, wherever it occurs in the world, in whatever epoch of history it happens, there is a legacy of bitterness. That is true of Cambodia, it is true of South Africa, it is true of Northern Ireland. There's no way that you can avoid that. But what is required is the promotion of a state of mind which enables us to move on, to accept the pain and the anguish that this has brought about. And in fairness, it is not of the making or the seeking of the government of Sri Lanka. I have myself been personally involved in a series of discussions which took place between September 2002 and April 2003 with the LTTE, right? And there was an incredible degree of intransigence on their part, because they believed in their military invincibility. So why make any concessions? Why take any negotiating process seriously? Because their feeling was, you may win a battle or two, a skirmish or two, but it is not possible to overcome the LTTE by military means. So because of the firmness of that conviction, and because it was deeply entrenched in their minds, there was a reluctance to engage with any degree of sincerity. So now that is behind us, and the way to remove the scars that you spoke about is to identify accurately the grievances, and then to address those grievances meaningfully. Economic grievances or political grievances or cultural grievances, whatever they are. Some are imaginary, some may have some substratum, and then to put in place practical measures in the way that we are doing. You can't do it all overnight, it's not possible, but to do it incrementally, in such a way as to remove this bitterness from the hearts and minds of people. It is a process, because it involves attitudinal changes. Your second question, the meeting with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton on Friday morning, the purpose of that meeting will be to tell her very openly and very sincerely about what we are achieving in Sri Lanka. What is it that we have in our minds? What was the situation that we had to deal with? How have we done it so far? And how do we propose to do it in the future? And how can we work productively with the United States towards the achievement of those objectives. The third question, India. As recently as 3 weeks ago, we had a parliamentary delegation from India, which was led by Srimati Sushma Swaraj, the leader of the Indian opposition in the Lok Sabha, a very senior leader of the BJP. So India is helping in a variety of ways with regard to housing in the north, with regard to the resuscitation of agriculture. They are making an enormous contribution to infrastructure development, highways and railway systems. In fact, the parliamentary delegation visited all parts of Sri Lanka. It was a pan-island visit. It wasn't a visit only to the capital city or only to the north. It is a visit that covered the entire island. We work very closely with the government of India. One episode does not rupture so close and deep relationship. And our approach to the bilateral relation with India is to look ahead, to recognize the depth and the range of that relationship. One of my distinguished predecessors in the office of Foreign Minister, the late Lakshman Kadegama, characterizing the relationship between India and Sri Lanka, said that it goes back a long way. It straddles almost every aspect of national policy, and it is lost in the mists of time. That was the picturesque phrase of the late Minister Lakshman Kadegama, who tragically was assassinated by the LTTE. So that was then, and it continues to be our appraisal of the value of that relationship.
Mr. Minister, you traveled a long way to get to Washington. Our next visitor has come all the way from Tahiti to ask you a question.
Okay.
Then we're going to go in back for the next question.
Somebody's got to go somewhere for their birthday. I'm Ray Vickery from Albright Stonebridge Group. Mr. Minister, Ibon and Bahama Studi for your thank you for your remarks. I'm very much interested in your views, apart from the human rights and environmental matters that you've discussed so ably. What are your views of U.S.-India relations now? Particularly, how do you see the role of economic engagement, trade and investment affecting the relations? And where are areas that offer real opportunities for further engagement between the U.S. and Sri Lanka?
Well, I think there are lots of opportunities. You see, this can be seen as a kind of triangular relationship. I will give you one illustration of that to indicate to you what I mean. We do believe that there are abundant opportunities available in Sri Lanka for American companies to come in a bigger way, for new companies to come in and for companies already there to expand significantly the scope of their operations. Now, recently I made the decision to go to India to address American companies that are active in India. You know, my reasoning was as follows. Now, we want to persuade American companies to come in. We think there are cogent reasons for their doing so. But rather than my coming all the way to Los Angeles or Chicago or Washington or Houston to persuade American companies to come to Sri Lanka, I thought it made better sense for me to go to New Delhi and talk to American companies that are already active in the region, companies that had intimate familiarity with the ground situation in the subcontinent. And that proved to be quite successful. Now, with the resurgence of agriculture in our country, I mean, say more than 80% of the fields that were devastated by the LTTE in the north of Sri Lanka are today cultivable, they are arable. And government is spending a lot of money providing water for the cultivation of those lands. Not only in the north, but everywhere in the island, there is a new focus on agriculture. So companies like John Deere, Caterpillar, and so on have tremendous opportunities in Sri Lanka. Then take tourism. I think there can be a lot of cooperation among all three countries, the United States, India, and Sri Lanka, the most visible growth area of the Sri Lankan economy right now is the tourism sector. Now, we had a flagship investment a few months ago by Shangri-La, the world famous hotel chain, and that enthused and emboldened other investors of similar size and standing to take a close look at Sri Lanka. Starwood is interested in talking to us. There are other American companies that are looking at projects in the power and energy sector, the oil refinery sector. So these are also matters that I want to discuss here in Washington. We want to upgrade our railways. Then there is a lot of scope for seaplanes and helicopters in Sri Lanka. All of this was not feasible at the height of the hostilities because of security considerations, but the situation has now changed. So given the degree of cooperation between India and Sri Lanka, there are at the moment no fewer than 100 flights connecting Colombo with Indian cities. So there's a lot that we can do together. And in my discussions here in Washington, I will not be focusing exclusively on the political aspects, but the commercial content of the relationship will receive, I hope, as much attention as the other aspects, important as they are. Thank you.
How about in the back? Do I see a hand in the back? All right, over here then. Yes, gentleman there, blue. Yes, we'll wait till we get a mic to you.
Yeah. I came to this country 34 years ago from northeast Sri Lanka. I'm a Tamil. We are peaceful, loving people. We are good people. We live in northeast. You could see northeast. We have been living 1,000 years.
Please use the microphone.
Okay, we have been living 1,000 years. And after last 3 years, after you stopped the war, nothing happened. You said it's going to happen in 3 weeks or a few weeks, the army is going to pull out. That's a lie. Please understand that. And again, you still killing our Tamil people. You're still raping the Tamil people. You're still taking their land and militarize the people. Still their military is there all over the place. One is to 4. And you still come here to America. I'm American. You come and lie in front of us. It's a shame.
Is there a question here?
The question is, the next step we have to go, if the UN fails, we got to go for referendum. The world is supporting for referendum. You understand that?
Well, I think that is a political speech that does not require a serious response.
We can answer that.
In the middle, back there. Mm-hmm. Wait till the microphone gets you.
How long ago you went to Sri Lanka, my friend?
Please, let's,
I went to this area. It's you can see the paddy fields.
use the microphone and
Acres
identify
and
yourself.
acres paddy field, you know, the verdant land with green rice fields, and all the tanks are full with water. And the all
Okay, we're not going to have a debate.
I saw in my own eyes 2 years ago, okay? And all the roads are well done, and all the paved and very broad highways. Everything is done for them. But my area, I am from Anuradhapura, and I'm nothing see, but I don't complain about that because we have to satisfy those suffering people for 30 years. So government is doing a fantastic job, and people living here, not going to Sri Lanka for years, and they are complaining about raping
Is there a question here?
Yes,
We can have a debate all day.
I
Let's have a question and get the minister
I
involved.
have one question for Minister.
Yeah, just one more. Can I say one thing about this? You see, to use that kind of emotive language does not help at all. To speak of killing and raping Tamils. Tamils are not being killed, Tamils are not being raped. On the contrary, as you point out, there is a disproportionate emphasis on the development of those areas, right? And the results are seen. How do you get a 22% increase in production in those areas? Because the Bank of Ceylon and the People's Bank has been instructed to give special consideration to requests for loans from the SME sector in the north. This is to enable the percolation of benefits to the grassroots, to enable generation of employment. So all of this is being done. So that really is an irresponsible statement to which I do not propose to respond, because it does not, it does not warrant a response, and I don't wish to dignify that comment by a response. But that's certainly not a helpful approach to the problems that we are dealing with.
One question, sir.
Yes.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Since we have a two-third majority, can we abrogate the 13th Amendment? The people from outside or the international friends, so-called friends, they think that 13th Amendment is the panacea for everything, problems in Sri Lanka. But it is not. So can you explain to this secretary that if we implement that, it can be very bad repercussions? You know, it's egregious way to settle these problems. You know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, there is no legislation and no constitutional provision that has eternal validity. Is that so? That is, the legal and the constitutional instruments that a country needs at any time depends on a set of circumstances. So nobody is compelling us to accept a particular constitutional regime. That is up to the people of Sri Lanka to decide. We can add to the 13th Amendment, we can modify it, we can change it in any manner that we like. But the proper forum to discuss that would be a select committee of the Sri Lankan Parliament, in which the representatives of our people, whatever political hue, whatever political complexion they may be, that all of them will have a voice. So that is what the President wishes to do, to enable an informed debate, not the kind of debate that emanated from the gentleman who spoke a little while ago, not a fatuous, not an emotional debate, but a substantive debate, a cerebral debate, where you use the mind, the discriminating, reflecting, thinking mind. So let the representatives of the people meet in the Parliamentary Select Committee and decide for themselves with a sense of responsibility what are the changes that the country requires at this particular stage of its development.
Okay, we have time for one more question. This gentleman in the light shirt, yes.
I just wanted to ask,
Introduce yourself.
I'm
please.
sorry, Levi Ashby from LSUS in Louisiana. I just wanted to ask, in the wake of the Civil War, has the government changed its amount of regulation of the economy in Sri Lanka in order to promote the growth that's occurred?
Oh yes, I mean the central bank and the Board of Investment are constantly engaged in the task of reviewing the situation and seeing how best our laws relating to investment can be changed in order to stimulate a greater investment in the country. That's happening in a continuous way, and you know, right now what's happening is the principal impediment to our economic development has been removed. I mean, the country always had a great many inherent strengths. Our geographical location, for one thing, right? Then the uniquely high caliber of our human resources. Then the free trade agreements which we entered into with India and Pakistan, with India in 1998, Pakistan in 2005. Then the effectiveness of the Board of Investment as a one-stop shop, which has statutory authority to exempt investors from 3 different regimes, exchange control, customs, and Indian revenue. So we have all these things going for us. The only thing that held us back during the last 3 decades was the problem of terrorism. Now that's taken away. It is now for us to change all our other systems, land ownership, the problems connected with land tenure, registration of title, all of that. Then the modernization of company law. Then we are taking a fresh look at innovations that are required with regard to intellectual property, copyrights, patents, trademarks, and so on, to encourage greater competition, people to come in. Problems connected with taking money out of the country for investment elsewhere, bringing money into the country. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka is examining issues of that kind. So all of this is now possible because of the transformed environment in our country. And that is why I said that the need of the hour is to put the past behind us. I mean, this has happened successfully in other countries. Take South Africa, for example. You know, it was a cathartic process, you know, to purge your conscience of all the pain and the sense of grievance and the hatred, And in Sri Lanka, that's not so difficult because of its cultural and religious underpinnings. So to do that, the rest are tools, laws, mechanisms, commercial laws, all of that. And it is very much an endeavor in which all the people of Sri Lanka are today united to make the most of this opportunity and to move the country forward.
Well, I think on that note, we're out of time. The minister has a busy schedule, and so I think we have to free him. Mr. Minister, we thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. We thank you for attending. In a second, I'm going to ask you to express your appreciation to the minister, but before you do, let me make one final announcement. The minister and his party need to exit quickly. I would ask everyone to remain in their seats until Michael can take the minister's party out the door. Once the party leaves, then you are certainly free to leave. Now, if you will join me in expressing our appreciation to the minister.